Hello and welcome to Empowering Georgia Educators. I'm so glad to see all of you with us. My name is Natasha Wilkins. I'm an attorney with the National Center for Youth Law, and I am excited to have some really awesome educators here this evening who are going to share with us their experiences advocating for an honest education. And what that really means is just an education that is what is best for all students. Um, to give a little context to the conversation tonight, in 2021, with the rise of anti-CRT legislation, with the rise of what we call anti-civil rights legislation, that's these things that are limiting what educators can talk about in classrooms in regard to race, sex, and other identity factors for our students. The National Center for Youth Law partnered with the National Network of State Teachers of the Year to design a fellowship for educators to be able to raise their voices to stand up for what is best for kids. Around the nation, as we started this fellowship, we saw over 800 policies be proposed at the federal, state, and local levels to limit what our students can learn about who they are and who their peers and classmates are. And so as organizations who are engaged in advocacy, we quickly realized that there were no better messengers other than students and teachers to talk about why it is so important for our students to have access to an honest and student-affirming education. And so I'm super excited to kick this webinar off with introductions from our Georgia team, our Honest Education, our Voices for Honest Education Georgia team. And so I'm going to pass it first to our full-time fellow who I've had the pleasure of working with for the last 2 years, Tracy Nance.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this very important topic. I'm very much looking forward to talking to you about advocacy this evening. My name is Tracy Nance. I am the 2020 and 2021 Georgia Teacher of the Year. Just like Natasha said, currently working in policy, using all of my elementary expertise to talk to policymakers about what kids actually need. I'm going to pass it over to Miss Vina Black.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and to talk to you also about my experience with advocacy. I've been a teacher for over 22 years. I've recently taught STEM to pre-K through fifth grade students, and I'm heading to Washington, D.C. as an Albert Einstein Teacher Policy Fellow, and I'm going to pass it on to my friend, Nikki.
Hi, I'm Nikki Hampton. I am the president-elect of the Georgia Teacher of the Year Association. I am a finalist for the cohort of Georgia Teacher of the Year 2022, and I currently teach fourth grade. I'm going to pass it to Shanika.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shanika Nelson. I am the secretary for the Georgia Teacher of the Year Association. I am also in the cohort with Nikki, 2022 finalists for State Teacher of the Year. I have 12 years of teaching experience and I currently teach fourth grade, and I'm going to pass it over to Vanessa.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vanessa Ellis. I'm an instructional coach in Muskogee County. I was the 2024 Georgia Teacher of the Year runner-up, and I was also in the same cohort as Vina. I'm very excited to be here tonight and talk with you guys about policy and advocacy, and I'm going to pass it over to Michelle.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Michelle Mickens. I teach high school in rural Georgia. I teach English. I am the Georgia Teacher of the Year Association membership chairperson, and I was in the cohort with Shanika and Nikki in 2022. I was the state runner-up for Georgia Teacher of the Year. This is very exciting advocacy. Most of us have been doing this work for at least several months, some of us longer. So why advocacy? That's a really important question. And that is, most teachers by nature want to change what is into what should be. We do this every day, and we're already doing the work. So when we look at advocacy in terms of why is this something I want to do or should do, instead try to see it as something you're already doing every day in your classroom. When children, for instance, there's issues with lunch because they can't afford to pay for lunch, and you speak out for that. That is advocacy work. When you have children in class who may not have enough to eat, or come to school hungry, and you make sure they have something, you are advocating for your students. So you're already doing these things. Advocacy enables people to be heard. It protects basic human rights. You're doing that every day, again, with your students. What we're doing, especially in this last year, and you're going to hear more about this later, we are able to influence laws and policies, and we really get to understand each other better. When you're doing this work, you go in with a whole different mindset, and you begin to realize as you're doing it, I've been doing this all along, just on a smaller scale in my classroom. And it allows us to see, and the people that we're protecting and advocating for, students, obviously, first and foremost, and teachers, we are able to highlight services that are available and resources for them. If you belong to any groups like GAE or PAGE, you are already part of that advocacy network. And what the main goal is to educate the greater community. You get to go out into the world and you get to feed that information to your colleagues and other teachers and tell them about what's happening. And it kind of lights a fire under people. And it really helps us feel stronger. And we know now in so many states, not just in the state of Georgia, what you see happening are teachers feeling somewhat helpless, and they're fatigued. They are feeling really powerless. And what we're going to do for you today is really show you how much power you absolutely have. There are over 123,000 teachers in the state of Georgia. And together, we are all so powerful, and we've been able to see it. These are not just words. We've been doing it. We see it, and the others will speak to this as well. When you get in a group and you begin networking, or even joining webinars like you're doing now, it is so empowering, and it's a reminder each and every time that you could do this, that you are powerful. And Tracy's going to tell you more about what that looks like in the realm of advocacy for you personally.
Good evening again. In May of 2019, I was named the Georgia Teacher of the Year. And in that role, technically, it's to be an ambassador for students and for educators and parents across our state. For 27 months, I traveled the state speaking with educators, learning about what it looks like in different parts of our state. And I can truly tell you that y'all are doing the work. We were all on the same page. Leaders, advocates, teachers, parents, things were going really well. And at first, I thought that, maybe it would just be a good job, Tracy. And you'll see in that bottom picture on the left, me getting an award from the state superintendent and from a board member. But then, y'all, they put me on the board in 2021, and they told me I couldn't vote, but I could talk. And so talk is what I did. You have to know how surprised I was when I was told all of a sudden that, that sounds a little political. And I was so confused. I was terribly confused. I know you recall the events of 2020 and what it looked like in 2021. And it was tough. It was tough for educators. So I started speaking out. And the more I spoke out, the more others were reaching out to me and saying, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Please talk about our students. Let people know, especially policymakers, what's happening in our classrooms for real. And from there, I didn't stop. I joined the Voices for Honest Education Fellowship with the National Network for State Teachers of the Year, and I started giving legislative testimony and showing up and working the ropes. And in all of this, it wasn't about politics. It was about making sure that our students' voices and their experiences are shared with the very people who are making the laws that impact them. And maybe the best part for me, you'll see in that bottom picture on the right, my work really started taking off this year when I realized the power of extending that media presence, extending that voice to our students. And we all have the power to do that. We all have parents, students, and colleagues that have important expertise for us to share and to help make it known. If you'll look at the next slide with me, when I look at this picture of my class, I don't see politics. I don't see red. I don't see blue. What I do see are kids, kids with very real hopes and dreams. Every single one of my students' parents want them to grow up and be successful. And so I don't see that at all. What I see is that it's a kid issue. We joined this work, if you look at the next slide, we joined this work to talk about what honest education is. And truly, it's what great teachers have been doing forever, right? We used to just call it morning meeting when we gathered as a community in the morning. And what we're finding is that we have to get more and more specific because we want our policymakers to know exactly what type of classroom our kids not only need, but deserve. Every child deserves to feel seen, to be heard, and to know that we have their best interest at heart, and we're sharing that. Honest education is student-centered, it is inquiry-driven, and importantly, it affirms every background. Every child is welcome into our classroom. So when we share our experiences and our expertise, it's not about politics, it's policy. Vanessa is going to share a little bit with you about her own advocacy journey.
Hello again, everyone. So if you are new to policy and advocacy, that's exactly how I started. So I'm going into my 14th year in education. And as a classroom teacher, I was like, that's above me. I'm going to focus on my students. I'm going to focus on teaching and making an impact in my classroom where I feel like I can make an impact. And so recently I was presented with an opportunity to work with Voices for Honest Education. And I was like, okay, now that I'm a teacher leader, not only in my school, my district, now at the state level, and I really want to be a voice for our students and for educators in our state. So I decided to join this activator team in this role to see what I could do to advocate for our students and our teachers. So first things first, what that looked like was just becoming knowledgeable. And I started to network with veteran teachers and community organizers to engage in as many policy advocacy trainings as I could. So if you'll see on the next slide, I've listed a few things that I've done in joining this work. So the National Center for Youth Law, the Georgia Coalition for Education Justice, the National Network of State Teachers of the Year, and Learning for Justice. Those are just a few. So I started by just being a sponge, kind of soaking everything in. What does advocacy look like at a local level, at a district level, at a state level, and beyond? And where do I fit in that? Where can I have a voice, and where can I be a voice for others? And so then what I did is I started to talk and listen to the people in my community, all different types of stakeholders. I went to different town hall meetings and school board meetings. I met with advocacy teams like the Voices for Honest Education and then also the Georgia Coalition for Education Justice. I started to learn so much about bills and how that impacts our classrooms and how it impacts students and families. And I tracked those bills through a tracker to see, you know, what's being passed, what's being discussed, what's being passed aside that needs to be talked about more. I stayed current with the news and I engage in social media. So what are real people talking about? What are they concerned about? So for state issues, I was contacting my legislators left and right. I was emailing, I was making phone calls, I was requesting Zoom meetings just to get my face in front of their face and saying, hey, this is what the people in my area are saying, this is what we're thinking, and this is what we believe collectively is best for students. And then I really jumped into the work locally in my school district. And so anytime there was something that was buzzing, I was like, ooh, let me jump on that and see what I can do to be a part of that. So when we're talking about resource equity, I work in a huge school district. We have 54 schools. Do all of those schools have the same things? Do they have access to the same things? And so an East Blast is a penny tax that allows our school district to get money and to look at our schools and see what they needed. So I'm out there talking to people about the East Blast because taxing or taxes can be a little scary. But if you tell them what it's for, what it's going to do, how it's going to help our students and our teachers in these buildings, my voice and speaking to people and sharing this information on social media and at school board meetings, disarms people and it makes them feel like they know exactly where the money is going. Working with immigrant families, I worked at an ESOL school. And so I have students and families who English is a second language. And this is a huge topic in our district. And so working with our ESOL programs manager, looking at building courses for content teachers who don't know how to teach students who speak second languages. And so making sure that all students have a good education by training their teachers. Working on literacy. So we have an early literacy bill that passed not too long ago, and making sure that I know what's going on, what are the best strategies for reading so that all students in our school district can get the education that they need. And then lastly, working with our local libraries. So there are many wonderful books out there that have been called into question lately. So part of my advocacy work has been reading these books and coming up and being knowledgeable about what these books are about, working with our local library and volunteering with them so that the messaging is appropriate, so that parents aren't scared of different types of books that represent different types of kids and that they have access to all different types of stories. So that's just a little bit about what I've done. Again, I am completely new to this work, but it starts with just, if you go to the next slide, there is a little diagram that kind of shows you. It starts with building those relationships, talking to people, then doing the research, figuring out what's going on in your school district at the local level, and then you can go up from there. And then deciding how you want to act, how you want to use your voice and demonstrate your power and hold our elected officials accountable for the decisions that they make on behalf of the students, teachers, and families in Georgia. And I'll pass it to Shanika to speak about her journey with advocacy.
Okay, thank you so much, Vanessa. So similarly to Vanessa, I had zero experience with advocacy. I stayed in my lane. My students were all that I cared about, as long as, those kids within those four walls, they had everything that they needed. And I didn't really find my voice until I became Teacher of the Year for my district. And then, of course, when I became a finalist, I became even more compelled to speak up and speak out. But nonetheless, a lot of teachers, as Vanessa stated, we like to stay in our lane. We are not concerned about what's going on next door. We're not concerned necessarily what's going on in our school. We're just concerned about us. And I think Michael Cabito said, we all like to stay in our silos. So we don't like to venture out. We just want to stay in our box. Although I stayed in my box and I didn't necessarily want to speak out, I was speaking to my teacher tribe, and we're all probably very similar, where as educators, when we're frustrated, when things are not going right, we talk to a small group of people that we can trust. And for me, that was my teacher tribe. And although I was discussing and sharing those issues with my teacher tribe, nothing was really changing. We made changes ourselves, but on a grand scale, things were still wrong. One thing that I've noticed, just being new to advocacy, in the picture, a lot of teachers lack self-confidence. We fear that we're going to fail. We fear that we're going to be viewed as weak or problem starters if we speak out against things, and we just don't want to have that stigma. However, as stated, once I became District Teacher of the Year, unfortunately, that happened during COVID for me. And so I had to speak up because there were a lot of things being implemented that were not good for children nor good for students. So I slowly started to find my voice to say, look, what you're asking us to do is not possible and it's not feasible and it is not okay. And we need to take a break. We need to slow down, keep children at the center, but also consider educators as well and how we're feeling. So I was granted the opportunity to join the State Superintendent's Teacher Advisory Council. And I think it was February. I was not approached to be an activator. I think it was maybe March. But in February, we went to a meeting. And in that meeting, we were presented with a course on policy. So that is where I started to learn a little bit about policy. We learned how to read bills, which I've never had the opportunity to do before. I don't find enjoyment in reading legislation, although that has changed now that I know the importance of being more informed and involved in the process. And so from there, I gained a not necessarily experience, but a little bit more background knowledge. And so if you will go to the next slide, I was approached by Michelle. She sent me a message and said, would you like to do some advocacy work? And I was like, sure, no problem. I'm not going to say when we had our first meeting and we started talking and we were meeting with Natasha, I was a little bit apprehensive and I was a little bit scared because I'm like, oh my goodness, what if I start speaking out? People see my face, people from my district, they see me speaking out. They're going to go back and report me. And, I was scared, but then once again, the confidence came and I continued to find, I continued to find my voice. The ladies with the circles around them, Vanessa, Vina, Nikki, and Michelle, they have been amazing in this with this opportunity and just providing support. Big shout out to Michelle. She's been doing this for a very long time. So she truly helped me understand exactly what I was supposed to do because we were in the middle of the legislative season and I was like, Michelle, what am I supposed to do? Am I just supposed to email these representatives? And she provided a lot of support. And then Vina and Nikki, being on the education policy fellowship for the state, they also provided a lot of support. I'm not going to say that this whole experience has been rainbows and butterflies because it is not. There were some times where I became a little discouraged and I was like, well, why am I doing this? Because I'm not seeing an impact. I'm not hearing back from legislators. What's going on? I think I sent my group a message and like, y'all, do they ever respond back? Do you hear from them? Because I'm not hearing from anyone. And finally, I think it was sign or die evening, I started to get some responses from legislators. So things started to perk up and I was a little bit more excited about the work that I was doing because I knew that there were individuals listening and fighting for the same things that I believe in for children. So with advocacy, it's a slow and steady race. You just can't give up. You have to be persistent even when you think things are not going the way that you want them to go. And so if you will transition to the next slide, I will go ahead and talk about my how I went about advocating. So whenever you're doing any advocacy, you need to be deliberate and you need to be knowledgeable and know exactly what you are talking about and what you're advocating for. It needs to be intentional. Always, as Tracy and others have said, put kids first. It's not about politics at all. It's about what's best for our students. Understand policy. So understand your legislation, understand what it's saying, understanding how this legislation is going to affect all students. And then finally, you have to be understanding. You are going to interact with individuals who have opposing views, but you can't attack them just because you don't feel the same way. It needs to be a happy medium, where you're sticking to the policy, while sharing and voicing your concerns and how this is going to affect children. So you may be speaking to a Republican, you may be speaking to a Democrat, but you need to keep your political views out of the situation and just stick to the facts. On the next slide, I share information about how I planned anytime I did any type of advocacy work. First, I had to identify our issue. Michelle was really great with providing us with what legislation we were focusing on or issue we were focusing on. I thought about what was my goal? What am I trying to accomplish? What type of change am I trying to bring about? Then you need to know, who are you going to target? Are you targeting legislators? Are you targeting your local school board? Who's your audience? Then establish your message. And as I stated before, you want to make sure your message is not attacking the person that you are interacting with, or belittling them and making them feel less than they are because they don't necessarily share the same political beliefs as you. And then from there, develop an action plan. What can we do to find that happy medium to work together to ensure that we're reaching all students? And on my last slide, I share some of the opportunities I've had now that I've become an activator and I've worked with Voices for Honest Education. I've had the opportunity to interact with legislators at the state level. Prior to this, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't really concerned about those people in downtown Atlanta, and I know that that's bad. And I've learned to be more informed and more active. Recently, I had a meeting with my superintendent in regards to MTSS, the MTSS process in our district, and this upcoming school year, something that I voiced concerned about with children getting interventions via computer instead of a teacher, because everyone doesn't learn from a computer. We've seen some of the effects of, putting children in front of computers for long periods of time with COVID and how that has impacted. And so for this upcoming school year, no more computer-based interventions. I know that some teachers are not going to necessarily be happy about that, but we have to keep all children in mind. I've also had the opportunity to work on Superintendent Wood's Teacher Advisory Council. That gives me an opportunity to take concerns back from educators in my building and district at the state level with the Department of Education, because oftentimes we don't ever get to interact with them and there's not a relationship there. I've expanded my talking with counselors this year. Their jobs were on the line, possibly with chaplains replacing counselors within schools. So speaking with them about about that legislation and how it would impact and getting them to call their representatives. Talking to members in my school and my district about vouchers. Many people were not aware about vouchers. That wasn't something that they were concerned about, which it's something that we should all be concerned about because it affects us greatly as public educators. Also speaking to local librarians at my regional library along with my school. about book banning, how we're handling those situations, how can we handle those situations, how are we working with parents to educate, and then finally getting the opportunity to work with educators across the state in my district to share my expertise of advocacy and how we go about actually evoking change in education beyond talking with just our teacher tribe, but actually making our voice heard and making sure that we are seen and respected as individuals and people. And I am now going to pass it over to Michelle.
Hi again. You actually provided me with a wonderful segue, Shanika, when you started talking about, that lack of self-confidence. And I think because of the backlash most recently, we feel very powerless, but we are more powerful than ever. It's just kind of been beat into us. We're not. We see things on the media, in the media, and we read articles and these voucher bills, all of these things. They wouldn't be fighting so hard against us with these bad policies, non-student affirming, if we weren't so powerful. So first and foremost, that is so important. And the best way to explain it is if you take what you do in the classroom with students and you transfer that to advocacy work outside of the classroom, you're using your same powers. I love the word power because we are powerful and you can use the same powers in the classroom for advocacy outside the classroom. Some of these powers, you could find these on the United States Department of Education page. This is all over. This is nothing new. We have so many powers. So the first one here is your attractive power. I mean, yes, being beautiful, I guess, will help, but that's not what I mean. What I mean about attractive power is how we relate to other people, your relationship building skills. You do that every day in the classroom. I can't tell you how many people we've worked with that are not like-minded. Vina and I sat with a legislator about policies for the Department of Education teacher policy fellowship that three of us on this panel are part of. And he was just not interested, but I just kept talking. And, he would make a comment and I'd say, well, what about this? Or what if we did this? And, he listened begrudgingly, but he listened. And I was able to get his time during a session that was really busy. So, and that's because I'm skilled at talking to students. High school students, you have to negotiate all the time. You can use that power to take it right over to your Board of Education members, your legislators, your superintendents. And so you already have those powers. You're already emotionally invested, just like you are in your classroom. And then you have the expert power. I should have put that one first because that's the most important. Tracy and Natasha, and if any of you are familiar with Michaela Arciaga at IDRA, they all said the same thing to me. We are the experts when it comes to education. You would be amazed at when you go speak to a legislator and you tell them something, they have no idea. A lot of these representatives and state senators are, they're insurance agents or they were business owners. They don't know about education if we don't tell them. And the worst part is the reason people really don't take action is because we always think somebody else is doing it. And then when you actually talk to, somebody at the Capitol and you tell them your concerns, they're like, I've not heard that before. Even though I've heard it a million times in the classroom, I've heard it in those tribe chats in the hallways with teachers and the chit chats, but everybody thinks somebody else is doing that job and reaching out, and they're not. But you have the power to do it. They have the power to do it too. But we want you to do it. We want all teachers to know we are the experts. We have that power. And then, of course, your position power. You're already a leader. You're already a leader of your classroom. Many of you are leaders in your building. If you've won Teacher of the Year for your school, for your district, you already have position power. And of course, again, teachers, coercive power. If you can get kids to sit down and do their work in class, you can easily coerce somebody to, speak out about a bill or change their minds about a certain policy. You're already so skilled at that. And then, of course, the reward power. We know as teachers, a child does well, they're rewarded with a grade or a diploma or candy or a sticker or whatever, a star. Your power is the power to vote. Very recently, we sat in a teacher advisory council meeting that, Shanika was talking about a little while ago, and a board member, state board member, I think it was Dr. Stan DeJarnett, and he was talking about a study he had read where there are a tremendous amount of teachers who aren't even registered to vote. Just by registering to vote and using that vote, the people you're not advocating for, but speaking to for advocacy, excuse me, you can reward them with your vote. They want you to be happy. They want your vote. This is an election season that we just left. People were listening left and right. I had a rep call me while I was shopping in Aldi and gave me his personal cell phone number to call him back. You would be surprised at the power you have. And so if you use these powers, go ahead and shift those over to bigger things, to things outside the classroom. Use leadership skills and use your powers for advocacy work. And Nikki will talk to you more about what that looks like, so you're not afraid to do that talking. And I think you could probably skip over this right here so we can move along. I really want to hear what Nikki has to say about, your rights to speak.
Yeah, so I'm really glad to be able to speak with you tonight, and I'm here to confess that I am that person whose voice was very small when I started teaching. I couldn't even order a pizza for myself without my husband nearby because I was just so nervous to speak to other people. But really, where does advocacy come from? It comes from a place of love. And I love all my students, just like I'm sure you do. And when one of those is having an issue or a problem, that's what really moves us to advocate. And it makes our voice louder because we want them to be seen and heard. The slide before was just a quick one about the Gray Panthers, because sometimes when I'm feeling small or weak, I actually borrow power from other people. Like I will use Michelle's confidence or Shanika's speaking ability. I'll kind of like take that on, like if she can do it, I can do it. And Maggie Coombe, actually, I fell on her as I was looking for a quote that I thought was Ginsburg's, but it says, even when your voice shakes, you need to speak. And she actually founded the Gray Panthers because she was experiencing ageism, and she actually incorporated a lot of youth into her work because she saw that they were unheard as well. So if you go to the next slide, you're going to see how we can change that narrative. And as other people have said, we are the experts. I was really impressed when we went to speak to legislators about the fact that they really do not have an educational background. We kind of assume they know what's going on. They don't. And so it's okay to go into a conversation from the position of I'm the expert in my classroom. I know what's happening and I need you to hear me. So I've got a couple of steps that I want you to look at quickly. The first one on the next slide is to prepare. So if you know you have an issue that you're concerned about, really do your homework and get ready for that conversation. You don't want to be caught off guard or feel insecure. If you feel confident going in, you're going to be confident speaking to them. We really want to present facts over emotionality. We're already emotional. We feel like someone we love or a student that we care about has had something, something done wrong to them, and we want to change that. We're really going to have to know what we're talking about and push those emotions aside so that people can hear the content of what we say and not just respond to our emotionality. The next slide is talking about pausing. So if someone comes into your conversation, maybe from a different angle. Don't automatically react. Just take a minute to pause and breathe and then respond. Because when you don't respond at all, you're sending them the message that you approve of what they're saying. And you may not approve of what they're saying at all. You might just be taken aback by what they've said, and you need a minute to catch up to say, whoa, did they just say that to me? Yes, people will say all kinds of things to you. So, you need to be ready with that information to be able to say, hey, hold on, am I hearing you correctly? Is this what you're saying to me? And then the next step is to really process what they are saying. Ask them the hard questions. Why are you saying that? What experience have you had that makes you feel like this is okay? Or what is the background that you're coming from? And we're listening to understand what they say. We're not listening to catch them in a lie or a mistake. We want to share their understanding of this situation so that we can come to a commonality of cause. Because when you butt up against another person and you don't find some kind of common ground, you're going to walk away the same way you started that conversation. So if students are at the basis of this, then we always need to come back to that. How does this affect our students? Moving forward, here's another big concern for a lot of people. Like, what are my rights as a teacher? Like, I'm just a regular person. Like, am I going to go to jail if I say something? So no, you're not going to go to jail. There's no teacher jail. So generally, your First Amendment right protects you for a lot of things. It allows you to make your voice known, and it's generally protecting you from things like donating money to a cause, maybe wearing a t-shirt, a symbolic protest. Inside of a school, the school operates in tandem with the government, right? So they do have a broader authority to limit your speech on and off and that depends on how it affects the workplace. So, you have to kind of be aware of what you're doing and when you're doing it and who's listening, okay? But if it's a valid cause that doesn't cause a disruption, it shouldn't be a problem. Moving on to the next slide. Thank you. So here's some considerations to think about when you start to advocate. So first, is the speech that you're making going to be part of your job? If it's a content speech, like you're talking about civil rights or critical race theory, if it's part of a course, then you are safe. You do not have to worry, okay? Second, is the speech about something personal? So if it's a personal issue, we want to make sure that we allow the school to maintain a neutral position, okay? For example, state testing versus just a personal problem with an administrator, okay? So we want them to be able to stay neutral, and if we have a personal problem, we address that in a personal way. If we have a problem with state testing, then we address that in a public way because it has a lot broader context, okay? Third, does the school have a good reason for preventing the speech? So on my next slide, you're going to see that it talks about disruptive versus disrespectful. So you want to make sure that we are disrupting the policies that are in place, that we're not being disrespectful. Because I feel like the moment you become disrespectful, a lot of people will turn off what you're saying. They're just not going to listen. They'll walk away. So, if you're provoking a protest, okay, if the school's getting complaints from students and their families, if you're getting negative attention from the broader community, that would be a time to have that hard conversation. What is best for our common cause, which is children? Disrespectful speech is going to be the one that is going to cause a lot of problems and arguments and even physical altercations. As we've all seen that on TV, right? So I don't want you to move forward with your advocacy from a place of fear. I want you to go into that space of advocacy knowing you have a right to be there, you belong there, and children are counting on you to be there. Okay, I'm going to bounce it back to Tracy.
All right. And it's my job to give you the quick and dirty version of our legislative process in Georgia, and then how to look at and read some of those bills. If any of this whatsoever seems unfamiliar, please, you are not alone. It has been a long time since some of us have taken a civics course, and states do carry out these processes differently. So if anything is new, don't beat yourself up. Store it away as something to share with others, right? In Georgia, we have a 2-year-long legislative session. And we just closed out one. So that means that in 2025, we will start the next one. And so any bill presented in 2025 and 2026 will be a part of that exact same session. It's kind of a really cool place for everyone to get in on this because this upcoming year will be brand new. Any bills that did not pass in the previous session, they will have to be reintroduced to our legislators. So how does it start? We have our Senate, we have our House, and the very first thing that has to happen is that there is a bill proposal. They introduce the bill in either the Senate or in the House. After that, it's assigned to a committee. We're mainly interested as educators, or at least what I look at, is the Education Committee, the Committee for Children and Youth, the Higher Education Committee, and then there are still places where education bills, find their way. So for example, that might be public safety. When we looked at new school safety funds, that is the committee where it was held. In a moment, you're going to look at an example of a library bill that was defeated this past session. In that particular bill, the legislators were attempting to take away our affiliation with the American Library Association. And that bill was defeated and it was held in the Government Oversight Committee. Once it passes a committee, it can then head to that particular chamber's floor for a vote. So now we're at step 3. If it passes step 3, we're going to start this completely over again and it'll go to the opposite house. And so we move through steps 1 through 4 for both chambers. And one of the reasons you get lots of emails and text in February and March is because there is a lot popping in those months here in Georgia, okay? Crossover day is usually at the end of February in Georgia, and that is halfway through our session. And in order for a bill to continue being considered, it has to pass at least one chamber by crossover day. So you'll see lots of people scurrying to talk to legislators around that time, and then lots of thank you emails afterwards. If it passes through crossover day, it now has a 1 extra month to make it to sine die. And I know everyone's always talking about how we say it. It's sine die, and it is a very special day for advocates because we can finally take a break and see what is happening, right? What's really cool is that your advocacy is important the entire way through, up until the wee hours of the night on sine die. All right. What we have found is that even if a bad bill gets through the Senate and the House, it's done committee, it's now up to the speaker in order to call those bills up for a vote. We saw many bad ed bills defeated this session because they didn't make it past sine die. Only then will it head to the governor. And so where are our very best places to be heard? In those committees. That step 1 through 2 right there, that very first one, that is where we get to give testimony. That is where it's really important to send those emails, text messages, DMs, y'all. I'm not playing. Get into their DMs. They're used to it. Let's look at how we read a bill. And this is just the quick version, all right? I have popped into the chat the website for our Georgia legislature. And that really is a great place to go and to just make a tab, save it to your home screen. When you see a bill, there's a couple things you want to take note of just to make sure you're speaking to the right people, to make sure you're headed to the right places. You want to make sure you're in the right legislative session. Okay, so the next one coming up will be 25-26. You want to know what committee it's assigned to. You also want to take a look at the sponsors. All right, a lot of times we believe it or not, Georgia legislators do pursue bipartisan bills, and it really is a joy when we see that happen. This past year, we saw a homelessness council created that was a bipartisan effort with many, many organizations across the state, including faith-based organizations, in order to give more aid to people who are without residence. You want to look at the bill name. Now, they're always going to have an SB or an HB in front of it. And that just tells us where it originated. That's it. When I talk about title numbers, what I mean is what part of our Georgia Constitution does this bill refer to? And as educators looking at legislation pertaining to education, that's going to be Title 20. Anything with a Title 20 next to it is education. And we need to pay particularly good attention to that. On that Georgia legislator website, you'll also find the status history. That's number 6 here. A bill has to have at least has to be read 3 times minimum. And as I said, it has to make it through both chambers to get all the way through. The bill that I'm showing you here is Senate Bill 390. This was that anti-ALA bill. And you'll see it made it really far through the whole process, but it didn't get called for a vote on the House. And that was the saving grace there. I know I skipped 5. I'm about to show it to you on the very next slide. LC stands for Legislative Counsel, and those are the attorneys that help policymakers look to see where their bill fits in. And this is important because those versions change constantly as it goes through each reading, each part of the legislative process. There are amendments being made to it. There are alterations. There are substitutes, what they call them. And so that LC number is going to change. You never want to be in a committee hearing giving testimony for a version of the bill that is no longer there. So you'll hear legislators talk about the LC number quite frequently. You're always going to see a summary. Section 1 is generally the legislator's findings, basically the reason we're bringing this bill. If you look at this one, you'll see one of their reasons. They said that the ALA president was Marxist, believe it or not, and they put that right in the bill. There's very little that they actually hide once you look at the nitty and gritty of the text language itself. Sections 2, and this can be more than one section, it's the relating to clause. What does this relate to in education? How is this important? After that, on the next slide, you'll see the remaining sections. You're going to have an enacting clause. That just means how are we going to enforce it? What will be the penalties? A directory language is just definitions. That's all it is. It's like a glossary that they stick into the bill, as well as an effective date. When you're reading a bill, what's important to note is that anything that is being changed from a bill, they don't just omit it, they actually strike through it. And that's really great because it gives lay people like us, more opportunity to actually understand the alterations happening. Anything that is being added is underlined. And that is the down and dirty of that. How is that for you? Please put any questions in the chat. I am going to pass this over now to Miss Vina Black, who is headed off to DC to do marvelous things for us.
Hi, everyone, and I'm the last presenter. This is the part where everyone else has talked about why and how you all can do it. You all can be advocates for education and how to talk to people. So my part is really about how you can actually engage with the legislators. Even if you're afraid to speak in the beginning, you can actually even email them and write to them to get your fears out in that way. So the first one I want to make sure you guys know is you have to know who your state and federal legislators are. If you don't know, that's really important because they will, I know one who will actually ask you for your zip code. What's your zip code? Because they want to know, hey, is this my voter that I'm talking to? Actually, Natasha, can you click on the second one is my favorite one, find your local legislator. So can you put in under search 30324? There you go. So right there, it pops up your state and your federal legislators automatically. You will know automatically who you can talk to, and for the federal, and of course, hopefully you all know Warnock and Ossoff, but the state legislators. So I actually have, because Sonia Halpern is actually my zip code for my zip code, and she has, and I've actually been texting each other. So when you get to know who they are and you're emailing them, they'll eventually give you their cell phone number because they want to hear from you. Natasha, can you go to the next slide, please? And this is the part I was talking about writing letters, emails, calling, texting your legislators. And here's an example of a letter that I wrote. And this was one where I blind copied all of them, so you don't have to write multiple times. And this one was the one where we were talking about the school voucher bill. And so there were actually 16 of them that voted against the voucher bill in 2023. And so we were like, hey, you're our champions. You voted against it for us. You care about public education. Can you please do that again this year? So we were writing to them and thanking them. And they were both parties that voted against it. So we were really, we were encouraging them and thanking them. So whenever you write a letter, you don't have to, you can email them from your personal email. You can email them. You don't have to tell them the school that you work for or the district. You can let them know you're an educator. If you're a parent, let them know, because then they know, hey, I have a stake in this too. I'm also a parent, not just a teacher. And you can also, make sure you are kind. You let them know why, and always thank them for their support. Always be kind. If you're attacking them already, you're definitely not going to get a response. Next slide also continues with why write letters, emails, because here's things I actually hand wrote letters too. I was like, I'm going to let them know how much I really care. And I wrote 16 letters, thank you letters, to all the people who defeated the voucher bill. And I realized actually Tracy was like, I think sent us an email and said, oh my goodness, it's going to the floor today. And I was like, I haven't even stamped them yet. What am I going to do? And she came to my school and picked them up for me and hand delivered them to all the offices for me. That was the best part. Okay, next slide. So this is where you may get responses. I know that Shanika was excited when she got her one letter she responded with, but Michelle and I actually ended up meeting Representative Glaze, and I'll show you her picture to you in the next slide. But she responded, and she was telling us, see right there, it says, thank you for your input. House constituents in my district overwhelmingly requested a no vote. See, she's listening to her voters. She said, yes, I'm voting no, because I know my voters, my constituents do not want it passed. So they do listen to us. So they need to hear from us. And often, one of the reasons I always wanted to go into advocacy was I hear complaints all the time in my work environment from educators, from parents all the time. So I don't want to be a problem. I always say that, don't be a problem, be a problem solver. And this is a great way to reach out when you find out who your legislators are, and emailing them and letting them know your concern. And Senator Halpern, I actually met her in person when we went to a policy day, and I'll talk about that in the next slide, but she and I have been texting each other. She congratulated me that I got the Albert Einstein Fellowship. The next slide also shows you, I think right there is there's Senator Glaze on the right hand side. Michelle and I went together with Nikki and other Georgia Teacher of the Year policy fellows. So every year they have State Capitol Day, Policy Day. If you belong to PAGE or if you belong to a Georgia Association for Educators, they have policy days. So you can attend and you can schedule, you can call your legislators, email them and let them know, I would love to meet with you. And they will happily organize it. We had several meetings combined with all of us. I followed Michelle with a couple of hers. And the person on the left is is Mary Margaret Oliver. She's actually the representative from my area. And she was my professor 20 years ago when I took a child advocacy class. And she was so excited to see me after 20 years. And she's the one that says, what is your zip code? She's the one I was talking about. And so, and I got to meet with Representative Glaze, and she actually listened to Michelle and I talk about our policy that we were interested in. And she said, please let me know how I can help. I would love to look at your legislation. They would love to be sponsors of bills. So if you have an idea for something you would like to change and you email them, hey, I would like something to be changed in education with this, they would love to hear your idea. And wouldn't that be great to help a legislator write a bill and sponsor and say, hey, I helped her do this. And actually that's what Senator Halpern has done for me. She found out that I was a STEM teacher and that I deal with robotics. And she said, will you please look at this bill that I have written about to help kids in underserved served schools to be able to get robotics programs in their schools. For example, when I taught in a Title I, a very, very poor school, we didn't have any robots. I had to beg people to give me even one. And then in my current school, There were 20 robots in this school. I couldn't believe how there's inequity in all of our schools, and she's doing something about it. Senator Halpern recognizes that schools, are not the same. Like, we don't have the same resources. So she reached out to me when she found out, as we were communicating, that I was a STEM teacher, and asked me for help to read the bill. And hey, am I missing anything? Because I want this passed next year. And then in the middle is actually, because of the policy day, I attended one of the subcommittee meetings. Oh my goodness, it was a bathroom bill. I stood in the back because I didn't sign up. Tracy went and spoke. I heard her speak, but they were 23 constituents who signed up. They didn't even have time to even vote on it. And they were talking, 21 of them were against the bathroom bill. It was the male and female bathrooms, and only 2 were for it. But there were tears, and even the ones that were for the bill were moved. There was a parent who went up there and said, I was against this because I did not understand until I had a child who was transgender, and she cried. And one of them even said, an educator said, I wrote a letter to every single one of you and none of you responded to me. I gave you my email address, I gave you my phone number, none of you responded to me. And they heard all these heart-wrenching stories. And I at the very end, one of the people on the chairman said, can I please talk to you after this? Because they wanted to have more conversations. It was just a phenomenal experience. Even those that were for the bill wanted to hear from those that were opposing it. So it's really powerful. So you can go in there. You don't have to go on policy day. When there's General Assembly going on and there's something you're interested in, they have it on that Tracy put in the chat. You can go look up the bill when they're meeting. You can even watch recorded sessions. You can watch it from your home. It's really, really amazing and powerful. That's what really got me into wanting to do more of this. It is such a powerful experience to see it in person. And I think one last slide. And the next 3 slides, I'm not going to go too much into it, but all of these are links, and then you'll get the QR code in the end. But if you don't know what legislation priorities are for the next year, Georgia Department of Education releases them. And the next slide is the Georgia Association for Educators already has it for 2025. And then Paige also has it on the last slide for whatever is coming up. So if you don't have time to go look at your local news or read, what's going on, you can automatically go in and they have a summary of what is going on. So you know what is available for you, and you can figure out, hey, which one do I want to focus on? You don't have to focus on all of them. Pick one, start with one, and figure out what you're passionate about. And then go from there. Email your legislators, and talk to them, make a phone call. They love to hear from us. And I think there's one more. Yeah, and the last one is, you don't have to go. You can go straight to your school board, like Vanessa spoke about. Local level is important. And then there's a picture of me with some of our local board members. The more you go, and the more they see your face, they get to know who you are, and they care about what you have to say. And then the second picture there is from the Georgia Department of Education Teacher Policy Fellowship. Last thing I want to tell y'all, I know we're all Teacher of the Year finalists here, or on our panel, or and the Georgia Teacher of the Year. You do not have to be a Teacher of the Year to be engaged in advocacy. I was just really lucky that this door opened for me. I wanted to be an advocate. And when I met Mary Margaret Oliver 20 years ago about child advocacy issues, I actually wrote a letter to one of the representatives about a child endangerment. 20 years ago, we were the only state that did not have a Child Endangerment Act. And my professor said, write letters, Georgia has to pass. I got a response back, and the letter said, you wouldn't believe why they were not passing it. It was Governor Perdue at the time. It was a bipartisan bill. They wanted credit. They were arguing about which party should have credit to pass this child endangerment bill. It was ridiculous. They finally passed, but I was reading, it was so comical reading this letter, but they ended up passing it because we all wrote petitions. Come on, we're the only state. So, but then, it's now coming back to it, because I met all of my wonderful panelists here, have this opportunity to find out about the Georgia Department of Education Teacher Policy Fellowship. And you don't have to, all you have to do is apply. So look for this application. I think it comes out in September, if I'm correct. And you just have to apply for it. And just like Tracy showed you how to read that bill, That's one thing. Michael Cabito, our former Georgia Teacher of the Year, he leads this. He will send you a bill and ask you to read it and talk about it. That's all he'll ask you to do. And Tracy already showed you how to do that. So that's another great way for you to be an advocate and to apply for these policy fellowships. And there's so many others. There's also Fund Georgia's Future. I found out about that group through the PTA. There's so many groups, advocacy groups out there. Just find out, put your issue in, and it'll pop up, and you will be able to fight for whatever you want and go out there and advocate. That's it.
And so we've created a Padlet. It will have this PowerPoint in it. And so if you want to look through any more of the slides, take a closer look. I know we've given you a lot of information in a small amount of time. So it's all in there. This Padlet is going to be a live thing that we will continue to add to, especially as things change over time. We'll take things out, add things in. There's even a link in there that kind of guides you into how to write an op-ed or, just different types of writings. But if you look through, it tells you how to join, organizations if you haven't already. There are some other PowerPoints in there that have more detailed information. So when you have time to look at it, you go ahead and keep that, and you're welcome to go back to it and revisit it how often you'd like. It will stay live, and it will be adding things, taking things out. And if you have any questions, I believe we'll take maybe a couple of minutes. You can put your questions in the chat box, and we will try to answer as many as possible in a few minutes. And you are welcome to do that. We are so grateful for all of you to be here. The more of us that are doing this work, the more good things will happen. We have been so successful. If you looked at the comments or in the chat, Natasha said some really important things. The one thing that is so important is that you cannot be banned, get in trouble if you are advocating outside of school hours, using your personal email, your personal computer. You have that right. You're a teacher, but you're still a citizen and a voter and somebody who's concerned. So please remember that if you're ever feeling any type of, fear or apprehension. And then I'm going to turn it over and see if we have any questions. And thank you all so very, very much for being here. Can we put the link to the Padlet in the chat? Let me see if we can maybe copy and paste it and throw it in there.
Yeah, definitely. Are you grabbing that, Michelle?
I think Natasha will have to probably highlight it and throw it in the chat. I don't think I have. Do I have control over it? I don't know. Oh, thank you, Vanessa.
We're also recording this webinar, and we'll share it on our social media platforms if that's how you all found out about this webinar.
And I'm telling you, Georgia educators speaking up this past year made a huge difference. We beat all but one bad ed bill. For example, one of the ed bills that we defeated, they were going to have classroom teachers create a checkout digital system for every single book so that parent notification emails went out. Can you imagine having to catalog your entire classroom library? It's wild. They just didn't understand how that worked and how it would be so difficult for us. So your voice matters. Please get in touch with your legislators.
Can I say one last thing? It is so much easier than you think it is on so many levels. Where I teach, I was helping to fight a book ban. So I have had to speak in front of the Board of Commissioners who were threatening not to fully fund the library. You literally, and it's the same thing Tracy will tell you, she's done it so many times. You literally, when the session is starting, you go up and sign your name to it. And, sometimes there's a time constraint. They'll tell you, oh, you only have 2 minutes or 3 minutes. It is literally that easy to go into a committee meeting, sign up and you get to speak. There are no boundaries for that except maybe time, or maybe, I guess they set those limitations. They could be a little tricky sometimes, but nothing is stopping you from doing that, essentially, is what I'm saying. And we hope to see you at those sessions. We hope to hear from you. And we are so grateful for all of you. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. Please send us any questions that you might have. If you have resources to add to that Padlet, please do. And then let's drop in our contact in the chat, y'all. Your personal emails. See, look, we're learning, right? Personal emails. Beautiful. Thank you so much. We hope that you have a fantastic evening. Enjoy your summer. I hope you're all getting a true summer. And thank you for what you do for our kids. It absolutely makes a difference, and Georgia absolutely needs you.